This is really funny having this cockroach in my ear. Do I actually specifically need it in my... I do need it in my ear, okay. Unfortunately, that's my bad ear, so I'm not deaf in that much. So the story of the book actually starts with the story of the Quen. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to walk you through where the idea of the book came from and what it's all about, and then I'm going to read a couple of little pieces out of the book. But the backstory was that a few years ago when I designed this symbol, the icon, about September last year, I did a trip up to Yamundi Markets where I'd laser cut a whole bunch of these things out of acrylic and put a necklace on it. I went and did the little market stall to sell these things as a symbol of a big story, a big message. And at the market that day, I had a lot of conversations with members of the public. And what I came to realise was that the members of the public, as I was talking about big picture sustainability and climate, that in general, the public was largely ignorant of some of the core details that they really needed to know if they were going to be effective in being a part of the solution to the world's big ecological crises. And so I came away from that actually sitting on the train and thought to myself, what I really need is I need a book. I need a book to go where I've condensed all of my personal 20 plus years of research into this subject matter into a little book. The problem was, though, there's a lot of material in the world of sustainability. There's a lot of material in the world of climate change, and it's very easy to fill 500,000 pages telling the story. So I needed some way to really cut through to tell the story in a succinct manner. About that time, I came across a book by Joe Romm, who's a climate communicator, called How to Go Viral. And so I bought that and I read that, and as I was reading that, that was informing how I put this book together. And as I was putting this together, I realised that I was missing a piece of a jigsaw piece. There was something missing in my broader conception about the story that I wanted to tell. And I'd come across an interview with a astrophysicist called Adam Frank, who was interviewed by the journalist Chris Hedges. And Adam Frank was saying that if you actually look at the latest data around how many planets there are around stars, you can actually calculate that there are hundreds of trillions of civilizations in the universe. And because the physics is believed to be the same across the whole universe, then it's likely that each of these trillions of civilizations lived on planets where there was photosynthesis. Quite possibly they had fossil fuels, and quite possibly these civilizations went through the same ecosystem collapse and climate change issues that our civilization is going through. And that was a very important piece of information for me, because what it allowed me to do was to sort of convey the story of sustainability rather than looking at it from the ground upwards, looking at it from the universe in. What's going on our planet with our civilization crisis, ecological crisis and climate crisis is probably happening and has probably happened trillions of times in the universe to other civilizations. Now, I don't know whether that makes you necessarily feel better about it, but at least we know that potentially we're actually not alone in this struggle. So that's the big picture stuff. And what I've tried to do in this story was to try and tell as big a story as I can in as short a time as possible. So this is designed to take about 2 hours to read. And I was designed this book as not as the sort of book that you see lying around on the shelf. It's not sort of one of those books that you put on the shelf. The idea of this book is that you read it and then you pass it on. And so this book is designed to be the piece of literature that helps people who hasn't got their head around this thing to wake up and start taking action. And if you look in the very back of the book, it's actually more by chance than design, but there's actually a bunch of blank pages where I recommend that people can write their name to say that they've read it, and then they pass it on, and then eventually this becomes sort of like a living being as opposed to just a static thing that sits on the shelf. That's broadly the story. It's written in the first person, so it's basically me talking directly to you. It's like, as an environmental scientist who's been doing this stuff for 20 years, I want you to imagine that I'm actually standing behind you, whispering in your ear, explaining how things came to be the way they are. That's sort of the narrative, and it follows some of my story and my personal discovery, if you like, of the sustainability crisis. My story starts really in my 20s when I spent a few years working in the oil industry, working on oil exploration ships. Great job for a young man, got to travel around the world, the money was okay, and everywhere we went, we trashed the place. We threw plastics over the ocean, we dropped engine blocks, 400 litres of hydraulic fluid just tossed into the sea, and on one occasion we drove a 900-tonne oil ship with all of our gear through a coral reef, and nobody got in trouble. And so for me, that was the beginning of my personal inquiry into sustainability. This book was originally written back in around September 2018. I had, in the book, there was a call to action. There was a chapter which was a call to action. But the call to action back in 2018 was a relatively sort of motherhood statement about, keep up the good fight and continue to learn and so forth. But I returned recently from a trip to the United Kingdom with my pal David over here, where we participated in the Extinction Rebellion over there. And so I've been learning about that model. And so when I came back from UK, I came back to the book. I changed the title. It was originally called What Comes Next? Climate Change, the Future and You. So effectively, I kept the same book. I just did a big fat edit on it, changed the title, gave it a new cover, but also took out the old call to action page and put in a new call to action, sorry, not page, but chapter, but basically and specifically talking about the Extinction Rebellion. So this book has become a call to action for people to join the Extinction Rebellion. And the logic for that is simply that, in my view, it is the only movement that can potentially make a very rapid change in the way that power is distributed in societies vis-a-vis fossil fuels and climate and ecological crisis issues. Okay, so that's broadly the introduction to the book. And what I want to do now is just read a couple of little chapters just to give you a bit of a flavour of the book. And it's funny, this morning when I was flicking through, is there a glass of water? Can you get me a glass of water or something? When I was flicking through the book this morning, looking for an appropriate piece to read, I just the other day penned, thank you.